Hello and welcome to our second ever NWBA digital demonstration. Today we are joined by Bhakti Saab from Arachne Forge. He is going to be demonstrating for us not one, not two, but three ways to heat treat knives. We are certainly looking forward to gathering his expertise. If anybody would like to ask questions to the demonstrator as this goes along, you can ask questions through using the chat section or the Q&A section. In order, if you're on a laptop, the chat section, move your cursor to the bottom of the screen and it's going to give you a whole bunch of options. Choose the chat option. Make sure that you're sending it out to the correct people, all panelists or all attendees. If you're on a phone, punch the screen. It's going to bring up a series of options for you. There's going to be 3 dots. Press on that, and that's going to bring up the chat or Q&A section. My name is Claire Guy. I'm your host, and we are going to mosey on over to Bhakti Saab. Just remember the rules of the room: respect and refrain from profanity. All right, Bhakti, we are going to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for attending the second of our digital demos for the Northwest Blacksmith Association. I'm here in my shop. I'm going to be, as Claire said, doing 3 different heat treat variations, just a couple of different options for people depending on what equipment you might happen to have. The first heat treat that I'm going to do, that most people will probably have access to if they're making knives or things like that, or tools. These heat treat options will apply to a lot of different tools, not just knives. It's going to be heat treating out of the forge. So here I've got, let me just check and make sure you guys can see. Yep. So here I've got what some people like to call the Daryl Nelson Special, I believe, I think is the name for it. It's just your classic Venturi style burner, atmospheric forge, running on propane. It's got a burner that comes in the side here with a pinhole, shoots the gas down through that tube, comes in a swirl in the chamber, and combusts that way and just naturally aerates. So I'll be heat treating out of that for the first one. Generally for this, you want to dial your forge down a little lower to more of a lower heat. Remembering that the magic number for most tool steels, and it's going to be a little different for each one, but for most tool steels, your magic number is going to be about 1500 degrees, give or take, depending on the steel. So that's the range you're going to want to be looking for. Color-wise, it's usually about like a medium orange, a Satsuma orange, if you're going by color. If you have an infrared thermometer, which I don't, that makes this operation a lot easier. Then the second heat treat method I'll be going to is going to be a oxyacetylene torch, which you can use to do what's called an edge quench with. And it's using a similar idea. You're using either a magnet or eye color to gauge the temperature of that steel, or a digital thermometer if you have one. And then you're going to be using that just on the edge of your steel, and I'll go over that later. And the third one, which I have over here, I'll take the camera over in a second, is a heat treat kiln that I got from Even Heat, which is my preferred method because it's a lot more accurate, a lot more consistent. But if you don't have that in your shop, then one of these other options is still a great way to heat treat your blades. So I've got 3 knives here that I've chosen, and I'm going to be doing the 3 different heat treats on them. So for the first one, out of the forge, I'll be doing this little stick tang kind of kitchen petty knife. And the reason that I'll be doing that one out of the forge is because it's very easy for me to get an even heat on this entire blade and most of the tang out of the forge, which is the real trick on that method. The second one that I'm going to be doing is going to be this little drop point hunter. I'll be doing that on the edge quench with the torch. And the reason I've chosen that is that it's a fairly small, manageable blade, which makes it easy for me to get an even heat using just the torch all along that blade. Longer blades tend to have difficulty with the edge quench method. The third one that I'll be doing is going to be this 6-inch Santoku knife, kitchen knife, and I'll be doing that out of the kiln. And the reason I've chosen to do that is because it's a full tang, a little bit longer blade than both of those two. So those larger proportions, it's easier to keep the temperature range where it needs to be consistently throughout the blade in something like a heat treat kiln, which has a more consistent temperature. So I'll start by thermocycling this little kitchen knife here out of my forge and trying to get that color just based on eye color. So the first thing I'll be doing is what's called normalizing, and I'm going to get an even temperature on this whole blade, and then I'm going to let it slowly cool down. And while it's cooling down, I'll explain what it's cooling down through and what that heat treat process is going to be doing. So I'll go to the forge now, and you'll see me just go in and out, trying to keep my tip from overheating and my heel from overheating. Just get a nice orange color on that whole blade. And it's coming from dead cold, so it's going to take just a sec to heat up to its temperature. I'll check in right now with Claire and see if there are any questions at this time I can answer real quick in the minute or two that that's happening.
Yeah, so there's no immediate questions. They might pop up, but I'm interested, Bhakti, where are you in your shop located?
So I am in my shop is my garage at my house in Burien, Washington. So it's made it pretty easy to stay engaged with my work during this time, which is nice. I know not everybody has that luxury, but that's one of the benefits of having a home shop. Of course, having a home shop comes with all of its detractions as well, but I'll take it right now. So now you can see up here on the tip, I've got that, well, it's cooling down now, of course, but it's got that kind of nice medium orange. So the heel wasn't quite up to that yet. So now I'll start going in and out, getting it up to that color that I'm looking for. And I'll switch it around and do the back. Now that this front is up to temperature a little better. So what I'm doing right now is controlling the grain structure of the steel. A lot of our members who are knife makers or have made a lot of tools, top tools or hammers or other things like that, will understand this process. So I'll try to keep it fun for those people. But for those who don't know what's happening, while you're forging a knife or a hammer or a tool or really any piece of steel, the area where you're heating up and working, as you work through that piece, is going to be the grain structure of that steel will be growing and shrinking as it heats up. And so you've got all these different aggregates of grain structure throughout the knife. And what I'm trying to do right now is heat the steel to the same temperature throughout consistently so that that grain is consistent throughout the entire knife. So now that tang is nice and hot. I care a little less about the temperature on the tang. It doesn't need to be super hard. I care more, of course, about the consistency of temperature along the blade of the knife. And I'm just holding the very tip of my tang, trying to touch as little of this knife as possible right now. So still got a little bit of a shadow in the middle of the blade. I'm gonna heat that out of there. Almost there.
Jim Carley says, great thorough description of the concept and process. Thank you, Jim.
That's about that color there. You can see it's kind of nice, and it's coming down at the tip faster, of course, because it's thinner out there. But that's generally a little brighter than that, right? When I came over to the camera, would have been the temperature that you would be looking for. I'm going to let this slowly cool down to black now. And what's happening is the steel is coming from, should have been about, 15-ish, if I hit it on the nose, degrees, 1500 degrees. And so that's just at what's called its austenization phase. And that's where it goes from being soft steel to hard steel. The hard steel, of course, being the martensitic steel, and the softer steel being the pearlitic steel. So the goal during any heat treat is to bring the steel up past that temperature and then freeze it there by quenching it, so that once it enters that austenization phase and it's gone from that perlitic to that martensitic steel. You want to quench it and freeze the molecules in that form. But what you want to do first, as I said, is ensure that you've got a nice, even grain structure throughout it, so that when it does that, there's no undue stress that can cause warping or cracking. So right now I'm doing what I call thermal cycling. Some people I think call it other things, anneal cycles perhaps, but I call it thermal cycling, and that's just, like I said, it's returning the steel to a consistency. So that one's coming down towards its temperature. I'm going to set that on the brakes here to cool down.
And Bhakti, it was mentioned that we can hear you better when you're towards the forge. If you face the camera, we hear you better that way. When you're facing away from the forge, it gets a little muffled.
Gotcha, will do.
Thank you. Okay.
So now I'll go ahead and I'll fire up my oxyacetylene torch, and I'll start cycling this one while the other one is cooling down. And I'm just glancing over at my kiln over here, which I'll show you in a moment, and it's only at 1407, still coming up to temperature, which is fine. It'll give us some time to play here before we start thermal cycling this kitchen knife in the kiln.
Oh, and Morgan Kirk says that he's heard the term not just annealing, but normalizing. Morgan said that he's heard the term to normalize as well, in addition to annealing. He just made that. Billy O says grain refinement is another way to say it. That's all.
So people have a couple of different ways of mentioning that same thing. I've heard all those terms before, but it's all the same idea. It's just taking that steel up through the temperature range and letting it slowly cool back down and just relieving stress.
I like to do this with a rosebud. You can do it with a cutting torch as well. Just keep your finger off that trigger. And I'm going to eyeball the temperature on this thermal cycle right now, but when I get a little closer to looking at quenching, I'm going to grab a magnet, and that's the other good way to quick test and see if you're at temperature. Because the second your steel enters that austenization phase, it becomes non-magnetic, which is a telltale sign that you're at temperature. And one of the easiest ways to do it if you're uncomfortable reading color. So I'm just going up and down that blade, trying to get that color to the temperature it needs to be. And it's almost there. I'm going to hit the heel a little bit more. I got a little overzealous. This is why it's sometimes better with a cutting torch, because you can pinpoint that heat a little better. But I got the whole thing pretty much up to the temp it needs to be. I'm gonna let it cool down. I'll probably switch to a cutting torch for my next heat on it. But that's good enough for a thermal cycle right now. I'll set that on bricks and let it cool.
And just to let you know who all is joining us right now, we've got 23 attendees: Anthony Reich, Anton Yakusha, Billy, Brian, Charlie, Dolores, Joe Elliott, bless his heart, George Blackman, Jeffrey, Jim, Joel, John, Kathleen, and Frank. Lee, hello. Thanks for joining us. Mark, we're happy to see all y'all. Morgan, Paul Wagner, we had some fun correspondence. Peter, Rochelle, RGB, Ryan, and Tabasco. Thank you all for joining. What
Hey,
a group.
everybody. All right, so I'm just going to turn the camera around here real quick, show you guys the kiln as I put this blade in. So there's my kiln there. It's even heat. I got the 18 inches. I generally don't do anything longer than that because I do mostly kitchen knives. So that's good enough for me. If you're doing larger things, if you want to make your swords and all that stuff, well, you know, you're going to have to get something a little longer, but 18 inches is plenty for me. It's got a nice little digital readout here. We're at 1453, so we're coming right up into the range we want to be. That's hot enough that I can put it in to start a normalizing cycle. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do right now. And boom, there we are. So that's that nice medium orange that I was talking about. It's got the coils on the side there. There we are. So I'll just slip it on in there between one of these. Nice and gentle.
Paul Wagner does ask, he says, do you ever normalize in a medium like vermiculite?
I have
Slow
not
cool down?
normalized in something like vermiculite. If you really wanted to take that cooling process really slow, then you could do something like vermiculite, leave it in there overnight or just for a little while or whatever. I generally find that letting my knives air cool is a good enough normalizing cycle for me. But the thing about heat treating is that you can go any number of different ways with any number of different steels. So if you're heat treating 1095, you'll run across knife makers who will have 3-4 different ways of heat treating 1095, same with 52-100, et cetera, et cetera. So you can really get really far into heat treat if you want to. Today I'm just showing kind of a broad overhead view of how to do a number of different steels. If you wanted to get really involved with one particular steel, then you're going to need to start looking at exactly what the austenization phase temperatures for that steel are, and you're going to want to look at exactly how long to be doing your soaks. You're going to want to look at exactly how long to be doing your tempering, which I'll talk about later. And vermiculite could be part of that. I mean, if you really wanted to take that normalizing cycle really slowly and let it slowly return back down through all those temperatures, which would not be a bad thing to do, you could certainly do it. It's just a little time consuming, and I don't have any vermiculite, though you can get it at your local hardware store. So if you want to go that route, it's pretty easy to get. Does that answer the question?
It does, and Charlie even added on as a comment that vermiculite acts like an insulator. It's also a clay-type mineral, and the high temperature will decompose it, releasing water and other stuff. Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie. Yeah, like I said, I've never used it, so if other people who are attending have more experience with it, please feel free to add that in. So that blade's been sitting in there for a couple of minutes, and it crashed the kiln when I opened it up, which tends to do. I like to open the door, get my stuff in or out, and close it as quickly as possible. I kind of lollygagged around for the purposes of kind of showing people what was going on. But it'll take a little while to come back up. Once that comes back up around like 1480, 1490, that'll be good for me. And I'll pull it out and let that be the thermal cycle. But this kiln is, it runs on 110, which I love because I really don't have much two-phase in my shop. But what that does is it kind of makes it a little slower to ramp up and ramp down. So if you're able to consistently run 220 in your shop or wherever you are, I would highly suggest going with 220. But for me, I was going for versatility and ease, and I'm a garage shop, so 110 power is a lot more available to me, so this works. Unfortunately, it means it takes a little longer, but that's okay. We got other stuff to do in the meantime.
I do have a question from Billy O. Do you have a moment?
Do I have what?
Oh, okay. Billy O asks, what do you do with your blades while the kiln is cooling from 475 to 400 or 1475 to 400?
What do oh, for my temper? Well, I don't temper in my kiln. My kiln, while it's very accurate and consistent in temperature, the way it's built and the coils and the temperatures it's meant to reach, it doesn't do so well at lower temperatures. And I like to temper my blades at about 390. So for me, honestly, you know what's really good at consistent and accurate long-term temperatures at 300 is your kitchen oven or a toaster oven. So I use a toaster oven sometimes, but honestly, I go in my house and I use the kitchen oven because I'm here at home and it's just easier. I keep an eye on it, and then I don't have to hang out here in the shop for hours on end because it's about 3 hours that I'm tempering when I'm doing that. So, yeah, that's what I use. Toaster oven. I don't, you can do it you can try out of your kiln. I haven't. It's just I noticed that it's a lot better at higher temperatures. But anything that's gonna hit that temperature for that long and fairly consistently, it'll work. Toaster ovens are great. Kitchen ovens are great. Your kiln can do it. You can temper over the top of your forge if you want to, but it's not the best. I would say that's like a last resort if you got nothing else. So those other two blades, let me flip this camera around again. Those other two blades are probably cooled down by now. Back to a black. Looking good
If you
to
could
me.
flip it horizontal, those are lovely. Thank you.
All right, so let me get this camera set back up, and I will do that. I'm just gonna do. Normally, I would do 3 cycles on all of these, two at least for my normalizing. But for these ones, because we just got this little amount of time, I'm just gonna go ahead and do. Oops, sorry. Let me get this camera set up here. I'm just gonna go ahead and do 1 cycle on each one of them because we got to keep stuff moving along. So we'll call that good on normalizing. Probably not. I would do another cycle at least, but these are just some demo blades, so too bad, so sad. So now I will get my magnet, and I'll throw that right here on my oil. And what I'll do is I'll come in and out until I think I've got my temperature. I'll hit it real quick against the magnet, because remember, the second that it's non-magnetic, I know I'm good. So I'll check my color. I'll say, hey, that looks like about the orange I want. Let me see real quick. And I'll tap it. And if it doesn't stick, then I go back in and I come back to that same color. If it does stick, then I go, I gotta go a little hotter. Definitely you do not want to go too high in your temperature. If you get to like a yellow heat or really bright orange where you're closer to 1600 or even 1700 degrees, then you're going to be way too hot, and you're going to be putting too much stress on that steel as it comes down through that quenching phase. So that's the one thing to remember. Got real hot on that tip real quick. Let's go back in. Feel free to shout any questions as they come along during this process. But for a second here, I'm just going to be going in and out of the forge, coming up to that temperature.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you get on your next roll. We do have a question though. Jim asks, your kiln has 4 slots or posts. Do you frequently heat 4 knives at once?
From time to time, I'll do 2 or 3 knives at once. It's better to do 1 or 2, just because you don't have to come in and out of the kiln as often, and you're not crashing your kiln and making that temperature fluctuate as often, which is really hard on your coils for it to be heating up and crashing and heating up really often. It puts a lot of stress on those heating coils. So I don't tend to do more than 2 or 3 knives at once. But if I was doing a big batch, then yeah, I might. But a kiln like this is just not the best for doing like 20 knives at once or something like that. You probably should do your heat treats in low runs.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. This is probably super hot because I was doing all that talking. a little bit, not too bad. It's right in the range on the heel. It's a little hot here at towards the tang, but you know that's acceptable to me. It's, you know, if it had gotten too hot here, I would have been crying, but I was all right. I got back to it in time. So I'll just get the rest of that up real quick. One note on quenching. The best way to quench is going to be with your spine, which is your thickest part of your knife, down. So my blade facing up, and that's because you want the thickest part of your knife, which is the strongest, to hit the oil or the quench medium, whatever you're using first, because that is going to be that thicker part will be cooling just a little bit slower than your blade. So here we go. I'm just about at the temperature here, and if you cool that first, then you run a better chance of cooling the entire blade at the same rate. So I'm trying to talk to the camera and pay attention here. And that'll reduce warpage. So
What oil are you?
It's stuck a little tiny bit, so I'll go a little hotter than I was. And you want to scrub up and down in the quench because you don't want to develop a vapor jacket, which is what will happen if you keep it still. Because whatever you're quenching in, water, hopefully not water, but oil, you're going into a solid medium, whatever, there's a boiling rate for that, and it's going to develop a steam jacket. And you just want to introduce new medium to the blade as the other medium boils off, so that you constantly have coolant running through. It's just like in a car where you're trying to run that coolant and that oil to keep it moving. You want to run that medium to keep the vapor jacket away. Try not to bang against the sides of your tank as you're doing it, which I am because I'm looking up and down. Every steel has a little bit different amount of time that it takes based on whether it's a deep or a shallow quenching steel or things like that. This is 1095, so I probably want to be down in there for about, I don't know, 12, 18 seconds. Just, you know, a little while. And I've been talking for about that long, so we'll pull it out. The magnet on the side of the tank.
Bhakti, what kind of oil are you using? Anthony Reif wants to know.
What kind of what?
What kind of oil are you
oil?
using? Mm-hmm.
I'm using Parks 50, which is a nice knife quenching oil. It can handle a lot of different steels. It's not too quick, but it can hit that deep quench as well. So it was developed, I believe, specifically for knife making. AAA is another great oil that you can use, but people have used old motor oil. People have used castor oil. There's a couple of different options. But for me, if I had to recommend one, I would go with the Parks 50. It's just
Cool.
And I've never really had any reason to try something else. So there's that. A little kitchen knife, you know. Put a handle on it one day maybe. But
we have another.
So that's out of your forge. Any
question.
questions on the forge before I move on to the torch?
Yeah, well, we have one more question from Morgan about the oil. Do you ever preheat your oil? Do you ever preheat your oil?
You know, you can. Parks 50 is supposed to do best at around 120 degrees. So I know the man who taught me, Dave Lish, he had a little element that he would run down into his oil in his tank like this, a little heating element. And a little thermometer attached to it, and so he'd plug it in, you know, a few minutes before he was going to go quench. He'd come back and be at 120 degrees. So I'm usually going in on like a big kitchen knife or something like that. Sometimes I'll quench twice just to make sure I get a full conversion of all those carbides. And so generally that'll heat the oil up to where it needs to be. Quenching that right there. It's you know, it's getting warm. After I quench this smaller knife, it'll probably get closer to 120 degrees. That's one of those things, again, that you can really dial in if you're trying to really get your heat treat dialed in and get those couple of extra points of Rockwell on your blades. Again, I'm just doing broad overview today, but that's a good point. Preheating your oil, depending on the oil, can be really good. Some oils have a thicker viscosity and they'll do better, heat it up a little bit. Some oils don't, and you can go from room temperature. But that's one of those finer tuned things that, yes, it matters, but if you are still getting started and you're trying to focus on just the basics, that's definitely not the thing to think about at that time. But it would help for sure.
May I ask one more question about oil?
Yes.
So Charlie had asked about vegetable oil, but I'm also interested. If you are making kitchen knives, do you want to make sure that the oil you quench in is food safe? Would you want to quench a kitchen knife in motor oil?
The food safeness of the oil that you use should not really matter, because I assume that there's going to be some grinding and cleaning and finishing and all that to that kitchen knife. It's not gonna, you might get some residual transfer into the top layer of your steel. I'm not enough of a metallurgist to know too much about that, but I have never run into that being an issue with quenching. Now, if you're talking about long-term care and keeping your knives oiled up, if they're carbon steel, which is a good thing to do long-term, then yeah, you're going to want to use a food-safe oil. Camellia oil is a great one that I use, but so you want to use something that's food-safe and won't go rancid. Mineral oils are pretty decent as well. But yeah, in the quench, it's not a concern.
Cool. Thank you.
So, move the magnet up here. It'll be a little easier to get at it off the torch. Oh, I was going to switch to that cutting tip, wasn't I? That's right. All right, hold on. Sorry, technical difficulties. Give me one moment. Any questions while I'm fiddling around with this?
Yeah, we had some questions and comments. So the reason Charlie had asked about vegetable oil was that he was worried about the toxicity of the vapors, especially for motor oils. So basically, whatever you're standing in, probably not the best practice to hover in the vapors that are created from it in general, but especially not with toxic ones. And then Jeffrey said, motor oil is a terrible quenchant and highly toxic. Please don't use it. So thank y'all for all your comments, suggestions, questions.
I stand corrected on the motor oil. Don't worry, I have never done it. I've just heard of people doing it and having some success. But if that's not true, I definitely stand corrected. And yes, I would not recommend much else besides AAA or Parks 50. But if you got what you got to use it.
Word.
All right, so got this on here now.
Agreed. Jeff Hunnan says canola oil is a good substitute if you don't have AAA. And you can get it at any grocery store.
All right, Just gotta get situated here, get everything in the right hand. Right, so again, I'm just gonna be going right along the edge of this blade, just trying to hit the edge here. Want to keep that torch moving so you don't create any spot that's too hot. All right, so that looks about right there. Now just come back up a little bit. So that's how you do it with the torch. Just kind of hit right along that edge there. Bring it up to that temperature. Get that wiped off.
Now, Bhakti, someone has
Oh, it didn't
asked
break.
that it's more important. Oh, no.
So that's about the worst thing you can do right after you quench the blade. I don't like that for the future possibilities of that one. But again, it's just a demo blade anyway. But right now, that knife has just been quenched. It's about as brittle as it's ever going to be. So there's a high likelihood that if you drop it like I just did, I probably just put a microfracture in it. Worst case scenario, I can snap it in half. Just be real careful with that kind of stuff. But there's one more. Now we've got that other blade that's been sitting in the kiln for a little while I've been doing this. And the kiln is
And if anybody in the audience knows if canola oil.
camera flipped around. There we go. Oh, there it was. What was that question?
Oh, well, Billy had mentioned that he had read or heard that it's more important for canola oil to be warmed than Parks 50. He was wondering if you or anybody else knew if that was true.
What was the question again?
Whether canola oil for quenching needs to be warmed, if that's more important than warming the Parks 50.
I don't know if canola oil, I've never used it. You guys, it looks like my kiln actually tripped the breaker on my power strip here, which it tends to do, probably because I crashed it so hard talking about it. So I'm gonna have to kick it back on. I don't know how long it'll take. What's our time out here? We're at 10:44. Well, I'm gonna flip it back on and I'm gonna get it going again and see if I can get quench out of it. But basically what would have happened is I would have just pulled it out of there and gone straight into the oil, because it's a kiln and I know that I'm at the right temperature, as long as it doesn't crash like that. But so I don't know. We can do some Q&A if that happens to get back up online before things are totally done. Then I'll go ahead and do another quench out of there. But I'm real sorry about that, guys.
Yeah. No, I think it's always good to see, you know, it's unfortunate when things go wrong, but that's how we learn various things. So I feel like you're certainly helping us. And also, we don't have a time limit necessarily, Bhakti. We don't have another demonstrator coming on, so you're welcome to go as long as you want. And you are also welcome to frame however you want to wrap this up, okay? There's no obligations from us.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to get this kiln fired back up. I'm going to pull that blade out and let it cool down, because I know that it got up to temperature. It just, you know, I was going to pull it out and let it finish its cycle, and I found out that the kiln had crashed. So I'm going to get the kiln going back up. While that cools down, I'll do a quick shop tour. By that time, hopefully the kiln will be back up to temp, and we can do a quench or something straight out of there, and that'll wrap it up. You know, I mean, it's just a quench, so it's not super exciting, but it would have been cool to show everybody the 3 different styles.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Well, we do have some comments and questions.
All right.
So while you're doing that, from Joel, he asked, for the blade that you just dropped, oops, more folks are asking stuff. From the blade that you just dropped, could you go back through the normalizing, the thermocycling again, and then quench again to minimize the risk of microfractures? Or once those microfractures exist, can you do anything about that to get them out other than grinding?
Yeah, I mean, once those cracks are in there, they're in there. I mean, you can regrow the grain structure and quench as many times as you want, but a crack is a crack. So the only real way to fix that, and it's not practical at all, would be to get the whole knife back up to forging temperature, take a heat on it, and give it a squish, and try and forge those cracks back together. The likelihood of that being successful is extremely low. So just be real careful while you're quenching your blades. Don't do as I say. Don't do as I do as far as that goes. Because that's, I mean, the heat treat process, you are putting that steel under more stress than it will ever see in its entire life ever again. You're asking it to go through a molecular change. You're then asking it to interrupt its normal chemical process of returning back through that change. And then you are going to do a tempering cycle after this, which I should talk about. I can turn the forge off now, make it a little quieter in here. But after you do your quenching, like I said, that steel is as brittle as it's ever going to be. So what you want to do is then run a tempering cycle. And that's what completes your heat treat. A heat treat consists of both a quench and a thermal cycle. I mean, pardon, a tempering. So what I've done is I've quenched all of these. You won't heal the crack. So I was trying to read that comment. It just kind of flashed through the tour. Okay, Jeff, I got you. All right, here we go. Okay. All right, I'm gonna keep it on this here. Let me flip the camera around. All right. So as you walk into my shop here, this, as I said, it's my garage. Very glamorous. Here's my grinding station where I've got a 2x72 belt grinder from Northridge Tools. Very happy with it. You grind some taper on the blade before you heat treat or wait till after. I tend to like to forge in my tapers a little bit before I grind. It just makes my life a little easier, saves me belts and things like that. You don't have to. If you have your blade still at full thickness all throughout it, it's probably going to help you in the heat treat, to be honest, because you'll have more mass, and that will help prevent warpage. But
I don't like to be grinding my belts away and sitting in front of my grinder for hours and hours on end. I like getting stuff hot and I like hitting it. So I forge in some of my bevels. If you do that, then yes, you just need to be careful because you're introducing mass differences, which are what cause warpage and stuff in your, there's a million things that cause warpage and quench.
Do you subscribe to the theory that 1 minute at the forge is worth 10 at the belt grinding?
Sometimes for sure. I think if you're going for like a rough brute to forge finish on your knife, which on these ones I am, these are going to be forge finish on those, then yeah, you can save yourself a lot of time. But that being said, if you're doing a full grind finish on your blade and you're not going to be leaving any forge scale or things on there, then why not leave it thick and grind down through that decarb? That's what I say. So it just depends, you know. Time is not everything. I mean, you know, if you're an independent business or an artist or something like that, then obviously it's a lot. But there are times to forge and save yourself the time, and there are times not to, and leave yourself a little meat to grind off. Just depending on kind of what kind of knife you're making, what purpose you want it to have. There's a lot of ways to make knives, and there's a lot of people out there making them in different ways. So I would say just find what works for you in your process. If you're like me and you love the forging process and you love hitting stuff and getting it hot and all that, then forge away. If you're more comfortable at a grinder and you're more comfortable removing stock rather than forging it and moving it, then do that. I mean, do you, boo? Like whatever works. That's what I say. I'm going to continue with the shop tour here.
Cool.
Then we got, I got a disc grinder from Fear Grinders. He makes a really nice stand, a little nice stand for it with a tilting platen, which I was being cheap and skimped on getting, and now I regret it. So it's going to be a purchase of mine. I think it's about 250 bucks. So it's not too bad. I probably couldn't make one for cheaper than that. And with FD, I'm in the shop, so I still have to sit it up on here. But he ships it with a VFD, which is great. Same with the Northridge tools, by the way. And for knife making, variable speed is pretty much a must, because once you get up past your heat treat, of course, you're going to want to keep heat off the blade. And one of the ways to do that is to lower your speed at the higher grits and things like that. Also, when you're finishing wood or other hand materials, things like that, you're going to want to be able to dial that speed down so that you're not ripping and roaring the whole speed the whole time, so that you don't burn up your material or things like that. So variable speed and detachable tool arms, I'd say, are a must when you're talking about grinders. I've got the small wheel attachment here as well, which lets me get into small radiuses. Got a little platen that I made to go on it that lets me hit my my transitions and everything on my knives. So there's that. Got my little welding station over here, still kind of getting that all set up. You can see I've got cords and stuff from trying to do this streaming. Here's where you guys were all sitting. Look at that high-tech solution. How you like them apples?
Nice.
Various storage of various sundries over here, cutting stuff, putting holes in stuff. This is going to end up being more of like eventually this is all my acids and solutions and things that I do my etching in, so that'll all turn into a station. I do all my finishing and stuff over here. Got my little sanding cart, got my little finishing table or layout table, things like that. You know, I got tooling and stuff for the press and hand punches and such in here. Got my Little Giant that I just got. It's these two, my Little Giant and my press, are in various states of maintenance. But this one, I do most of my forging for my Damascus knives on. That's the workhorse there. I just need to finish replacing this line here. Got cut while I was moving a few months ago, so I had to go replace it. And then the Little Giant has got different things. I just got this a little bit ago, and I'm working on refurbishing it. It's a great little runner. Just needs a little work and a little love. And then, of course, my forge, which you folks saw. Got the ox torch there. Now my anvil, this one's a fun one. I don't know what make or weight my anvil is. I haven't been able to find any marks. Anybody watching who might be able to get any clues as I do this zoom by, But as you can see, at some point, something happened here. And it's like, well, the
Bhakti,
plate
your
on
video
here as a
is
foot instead.
freezing. Oh,
Feel better
Bhakti,
now?
it's telling us yeah, it's saying your bandwidth is low, so it might be from roaming around in the various corners. It's working right now though, from where you are. It was when you got down low that it told us
Oh,
your
okay. It
bandwidth
probably was picking
low.
up some interference from the anvil being right there. I don't know. All that steel. But anyhow, I'll zoom instead if I can. Oh, I can't zoom. But is it still good?
Yeah, we can see it now. It's in focus.
Okay, I'm gonna zoom in right here. That's the closest I can get to seeing a mark. And maybe somebody can tell. I think maybe it was a Trenton or Fisher. I don't know. Yeah, I want to say Fisher, Paul. I think I'm with you. I think that's what it was one day. And they went in and they put a new face on it. You can still see some of the spots where they welded that face on there. So that's just my Franken anvil. It's had a life and it's still plugging, and it's got its Frankenstein thing going on. But rubbing charcoal. Oh, I haven't tried that, Lee. I'll give that a shot. Do the old charcoal trick, get a rubbing of the mark here. It's pretty worn. I don't know if I'm gonna really get much, but I'll give it a shot. But it's got some pretty good bounce to it. Still works nice. Whoever put that face on did a nice job. Oh, I got this magnet back here. It's making it sound all weird. Hold on. There we go. But there you go. I'll take it. So
Heck yeah.
I need to build a new stand for it. Let's check the kiln over here. 1346. So we got a little while to come up still until we get to that temperature.
Well,
So,
I will say that. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say Frank Bobbio, he had written that on our oil discussion from earlier, canola oil and peanut oil are both fine as quench on simple steel up to 1084. And some preheat should be done on the oil. Might be a little slow to use on the 1095. While vegetable oil works pretty good, keep in mind it has a shelf life not only from going rancid, but it doesn't work the same after many uses, just like oil in a French fryer has a life cycle depending on how many treats. Excellent observation. Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, Frank's got a lot of good knowledge on heat treat. He and I were chatting the other day. He's done a lot of testing and stuff like that. So anytime that he chimes up with some heat treat stuff, I'm listening for sure. Thank you, Frank.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm checking my kiln here. It's coming back up. It probably will be a couple more minutes until I can get a quench out of it. We can stick around if you want, if people have stuff they want to ask or things like that, but it's going to be kind of some dead space until then. I'm not really sure how to fill that.
No, here. Well, I do have a theory that whenever you try to do something, you'll do it great. But when a camera starts filming it, something will go wrong. I don't know if it's Murphy's Law or what. So I think we're just, we're going with it, which is great. We really appreciate your patience and working with us today, Bhakti.
Oh, for sure. I appreciate everybody being here.
Yeah, and we'll just let folks know here. I'll give you a break for a couple minutes. I'll talk to the audience, Bhakti, and then we'll come back to you. Okay?
Okay, sure. I'll keep an eye on this kiln here. All right.
Yeah, you get a couple minute break. So hello for all y'all joining from home. My name is Claire Guy, and I'm your host today. I might have been the disembodied voice hovering over Bhakti's demonstration. We want to welcome you all and thank you all for joining us for our second ever digital demo. We appreciate everyone for following the rules of the room and being respectful and making sure that we're using language that children would be able to hear. We do want to let you know that we have another digital demo already scheduled for next Saturday at 10 in the morning. That one's going to be with Hunter Dahlberg, and it's going to be pretty exciting. So we're certainly looking forward to it. And so be looking out in your email inboxes for that. Now, currently, we are watching Bhakti Saw, and he is demonstrating. Oh, and as Kelly mentioned, sorry, next Saturday, it's going to be not just Hunter, but it's also going to be Taylor from Bear Iron. And so that's going to be excellent. You're going to get 2 demos back to back. Also, your president, Kellen Batum, is going to be hosting that day. And so it'll be fun to share the wealth of hosting duties. If you yourself are interested in doing a demonstration, either live streamed as we're doing now, pre-recorded, if you're interested in maybe even doing an interview with somebody, or if you'd have a slideshow that you would like to share with the group, we are really looking for ways to expand our virtual presence online and to give us reasons to come together at this time, that we are, you know, doing the right thing by staying apart. And so just let us know. You can always email webmaster@blacksmith.org, and we'll get your information. We'll be able to call you and talk some of these processes out. Now, today we are meeting with Bhakti Saw from his Arachne Forge. He is showing us not 1, not 2, but 3 different ways to heat treat knives. We're taking a small pause because the kiln ended up crashing. So we're waiting for it to get back up to temperature, but we're gonna go ahead and mosey on back to Bhakti. Your video is spotlighted. There you go. Thank you.
So I just put the knife back in. It's at 1305. It was out for its thermal cycle. So now it's back in. It's coming back up to temp. Oh, get up there. And it's dropping back down now.
How long have you had
I
this
don't know.
kiln?
Yeah, this circuit is, yeah, it's still doing good. Just wanted to make sure those elements were still on. Yeah, you know what? It's, the thing about the kiln is it takes a long time to ramp up and down. I don't know if it's going to be worth waiting around here today. Sorry, folks. But basically what would happen is I'd open that up, I'd pull that out, I'd throw it in there just like I did the other 2 and call it good. It just removes a lot of the guesswork with the magnet and the color and the temperature and all that, because I have a nice digital readout. But I keep crashing it right now because I'm not as deft at holding the camera and doing it and all that as I should have had a second camera point set up now that I'm realizing it. Yeah, I would say, I guess that's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll have more of these digital demos coming, and things will just continue to get better. I'm Bhakti Saw. I'm forging out of my home shop here out of my garage, Arachne Forge in Burien, Washington. You can check out my website if you want to see some of the stuff that I do. It's arachneforge.com, ARACHNEFORGE.com. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. We're super glad to see members getting into this, and we hope to be bringing really, really awesome content to you guys during this time. Everybody stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane in your quarantine, whatever you're doing. You know, be good out there. Excellent. All right, I'm gonna switch it back over to you, Claire.
Okay, thank you so much, Bhakti. We really appreciate you going through and doing our 2nd ever digital demo. It's huge. Now Bhakti, if you still have your audio on, just to let you know, somebody did have a question. I think your feedback would be nice on it.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see, it was Joel. He asked a side question. For a beginner, what would be a good starting steel for knife making, both from a forming and heat treating perspective?
Is he's forging or stock removal, or what is he? Because that depends as well.
Yeah, well, and that's a legitimate question. He says forging for him personally.
Forging, yeah. You really can't go wrong with a 10 series to begin with. It has a really broad heat treat range, so it's really easy to hit the temperatures that you need to in order to get a good hardness out of it. It forges really well. It's got good grain growth during the forging process, and it finishes up nice. I would go with that. I'd say 1080 is probably, that would be my recommendation for starting out with anybody. 1095 is pretty nice as well. 1075 is decent. It's going to have less carbon, so it's going to be more for like a tougher steel, outdoor kind of steel. Jim Carley was asking where I buy my steel. There's a couple of different places. You know, sometimes I'll get it locally from a guy named Kelly Couples, who's a great, hey Anton, yeah, you got it, man, good to see you. Who's a part-time supplier, I believe, out of Eastern Washington somewhere. I want to say Spokane maybe, and he's great. There's Aldo, New Jersey Steel Baron is a good online source for Yakima. Thanks, Rochelle. Is a good source for tool steel as well. They've got a good supply hookup. I mean, as far as where to get it, find somewhere that carries the steel in the proportions that you want, and just, you know, stick with them. It can be kind of hard, especially if you're looking for larger dimensions. Like if you're looking for like 1x1 square to do some larger integral forging and things like that, it can be a little tougher to find that kind of steel. But you know, you got a lot of online purveyors as well. You got, I think, let's see, USA Knife Maker, Jantz. You got Alpha Knife Supply. I love them. Kelly ships for free on orders over 100. That is true. Kelly's great. I can't recommend him enough. I buy all my steel for making my Damascus from him. He's my favorite supplier for that. So yeah, like I said, find something you can get consistently that you like working with and go with it. I mean, honestly, a decent source of steel, go to your scrapyard and get old leaf springs from trucks. I mean, it's going to have a lot of wear and use on it, and some of it might have tiny microfractures or be overstressed or whatever, but it's cheap, and most times it's 5160, and it's pretty decent steel for knife making. So yeah, +3 on Kelly from Billy. Yeah, he's the local champ. I love Kelly.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and Jeffrey Heinen says that Kelly ships for free on orders over $100, and that shipping steel, as most of us know, often costs a lot.
He also ships quenching oil, both AAA and Parks 50, or he did last time that I got a price list for him. It's Octo Hunter, OCTOHUNTER at, I forget what client he uses.
Oh.
See if I can do that.
Yeah. What's his last name, Kelly?
Couples, CUPPLES.
All right. No, that's great. Oh, and somebody, Octahunter at charter.net. Billy just shared it. So, and we're getting a
perfect.
lot.
There it is. Thank you.
Yeah. And at Bhakti, it looks like your video has frozen. So I'm going to switch back over here. Thank you so much for answering those final questions. Oh, no, it's
you got it.
Now's not the time. I kid. But I just want to let you know that, gosh, it starts way up here. From Morgan, he says, thank you, Bhakti. Charlie says, thank you to everyone. Y'all have a good weekend. Lee says, thanks, Bhakti. This is fun. Jerry says, thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone. Great stuff. Have a great day. Peter is out. Jeffrey really liked the virtual demonstrations. Jim Carley said, super cool. And Paul Wagner says, thanks so much, everybody. Anthony, we have sent the link for, can we send out the link for Bhakti's website? Yes, I'll add that to the next announcement. Bhakti, while you might not have things for sale on your website, do you take custom orders?
I do. Most of my work right now is kind of like job-to-job custom stuff. So I'm, get at me if you want a knife. I do mainly Damascus kitchen knives, things like that. Let's see. I'm working on a paring knife right now. Where did I put that? It's over here. That guy, a little Damascus integral kitchen knife there. Little paring knife. So that kind of stuff, I got billet of feather that I'm getting ready to start in on again. I don't know if you guys can see that there. Maybe.
If you pull it back
Camera's not
some-
good enough.
Yeah, if you pull it back, it might
Whatever.
focus.
Yeah,
Okay.
get at me if you want a knife.
Cool. All right. And then, yeah, Jeffrey just shared the website for Kelly's website. Joel says, thank you so much. And let's see, Billy O, he says, right on. Thanks, Bhakti. Take care, everyone. So thank you so much, Bhakti. You have a happy rest of your Saturday. We appreciate you joining us and doing the demo today. It means a lot. And I'm going
All
to
right,
move
thanks,
back
y'all.
over.
Happy Saturday.
Yep. All right. And one thing I was totally negligent in this time is, let's be real. We're not having mentoring center events right now. We're also not having our conference, yet there are still bills to be paid for the NWBA. And so if you think that perchance you might have a little spare change, something extra to offer since we won't be going to conference this year, we do have a donation link set up in our website, and you can access it by going to www.blacksmith.org/donate. And so we'll be sure to plug that more often because, yeah, it's an interesting time for everybody right now. But if anyone wants to give, we certainly want to make the means available to do so. So we want to say thank you to everyone involved, my silent, and you can't see them, but co-host Patricia and Kellen, thank you so much. Bhakti did a marvelous demonstration. We are so happy, so lucky to have such knowledgeable people in this group. My name is Elizabeth Claire Guy. You may call me Claire. And this has been the second ever digital demo. Please look out for an announcement because we're going to have another demo next Saturday at 10 a.m. And Kellen Bainham, your president, is going to be the host. So stay tuned and thanks for joining, y'all. Take care of yourself and each other.